a forgotten shepherd, saved soldiers in battle, and earned a rare Medal of Honor. But few know the full story behind his courage. He wasn't just a dog. He was a hero who shielded his handler from an explosion and became a Medal of Honor canine the world rarely talks about. From Kentucky farm pup to war hero, this canine sacrifice changed lives, but his Medal of Honor journey remained hidden from history. One soldier's survival, one dog's loyalty, and a Medal of Honor that tells the untold story of the bravest canine few have ever heard about. In the heart of rural Kentucky, where wide fields stretched into the horizon and the mornings break with golden light over rolling hills, a German shepherd named Hunter was born into a life no one could have predicted. His litter was ordinary at first glance, a group of squirming puppies nestled close to their mother in a small farmhouse kennel. Yet even in those first weeks, Hunter's watchful eyes, sharper than his siblings, hinted at the destiny waiting for him. Farmers who stopped by to look at the pups remarked on his stance, alert, steady, cautious yet brave. The breeder, an older man named Ray Turner, often said, "That one sees the world differently. He's going to make something of himself." What Ray couldn't know was that this pup would one day be written into the legacy of American valor, not as a soldier in uniform, but as a canine partner who would carry courage in his every step. Hunter was adopted at 12 weeks by a young sheriff's deputy named Mark Collins. Mark was tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile, but eyes that carried the weight of someone who had seen too many small-town tragedies. He'd grown up in a military family. His father had served in Vietnam, and his brother was deployed overseas. Mark had always wanted to serve his community in a different way, and law enforcement gave him that path. When he picked Hunter from the litter, he wasn't just adopting a dog. He was looking for a partner. Hunter grew into that role with a quiet seriousness, shadowing Mark through the rhythms of life, whether it was jogging through empty country roads at dawn, training on obedience fields, or simply sitting beside him on long nights. Their bond, forged in those early years, became the foundation of a story that would later stretch far beyond their small town. Hunter was exceptional in his training. By the time he was 2, his ability to track scents was unmatched in the county. He could locate lost children, sniff out hidden contraband, and respond to commands with lightning precision. Mark often joked with colleagues, "This dog's smarter than half the deputies here," but everyone knew there was truth behind the humor. The sheriff's department recognized Hunter's potential and enrolled him in advanced training programs. Soon, Hunter wasn't just a small-town canine. He was competing with the best of the best. By the time Mark got word that the military was expanding its canine program and was looking for exceptional recruits, he knew Hunter was destined for something greater. The transition was difficult. Mark loved his dog with the devotion of a best friend and brother. Letting him go was not easy, but he believed in service above self. When the recruiters asked if Hunter could be evaluated for military use, Mark sat on the porch with Hunter that evening, scratching behind his ears, staring at the horizon. "You were meant for something bigger than just these county roads, buddy," he whispered. Hunter, with those amber eyes glowing in the fading sun, seemed to understand. Within weeks, Hunter was in Texas, undergoing rigorous military training. It was there that he met his new handler, Staff Sergeant Daniel Reed. Daniel was a decorated soldier, a man who had seen the deserts of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan. He was steady, disciplined, but carried with him the invisible scars of someone who had lost brothers in arms. Each mission carried risk, but Daniel and Hunter moved with a rhythm that seemed almost unbreakable. Stories of their courage spread quickly through the platoon. In one mission in Kandahar, Hunter identified a pressure plate buried under the sand just feet from where soldiers were about to step. In another, he tracked a hidden weapons cache in a mud wall compound that could have fueled weeks of attacks. Each time, lives were saved because of Hunter's nose and Daniel's guidance. Soldiers who once joked about the dog soon spoke of him with reverence. Hunter wasn't just part of the team, he was the heartbeat of it. But their defining moment came on a scorching afternoon in Helmand Province. The sun beat down mercilessly, the dust choking every breath. Their unit was moving through a small village rumored to be seeded with explosives.
Hunter was leading the patrol, nose low, ears flicking. Suddenly, he froze. Daniel recognized the signal instantly. There was something ahead. Daniel moved carefully, following Hunter's cues, until the shepherd pawed at a patch of earth near a doorway. Within moments, Daniel realized they had found an IED cleverly concealed. As engineers moved in to defuse it, Hunter pulled sharply to the side, dragging Daniel toward a narrow alley. His instincts were screaming. And then it happened. A secondary device detonated nearby. The blast shook the ground, throwing dust and shrapnel. Daniel hit the dirt, ears ringing. When he looked up, Hunter was between him and the explosion, his body shielding Daniel from debris. The dog whimpered, but stood firm, tail low, eyes locked on his handler, as if to say, "I've got you."
That moment became legend within the unit. Though Hunter suffered injuries, he survived, and his actions directly saved Daniel's life. The story reached command, then beyond. Reports were filed, medals recommended. Soldiers wrote letters home about the dog who leapt into fire. Yet when the unit rotated stateside, Hunter's heroism was not blasted across headlines. It was quietly acknowledged within the military, where so many acts of bravery go unrecognized in the wider world. Daniel, however, never forgot. To him, Hunter wasn't just a dog. He was a brother who had carried him through the darkest valley. When Hunter returned home, limping slightly but still proud, Daniel fought to keep him by his side. Regulations often made it difficult for handlers to adopt their canine partners, but after advocacy and paperwork, Hunter was officially retired into Daniel's family. Their life together in the quiet suburbs of North Carolina was a different kind of mission, one of healing. Daniel, who struggled with restless nights and memories of war, found peace in Hunter's presence. The dog who had once sniffed out bombs now lay at his feet during sleepless hours, grounding him in the present. Together, they attended veterans events, spoke at schools, and quietly became ambassadors of a story few people knew. Parents would listen in awe as Daniel recounted the day Hunter shielded him from an explosion, their children wide-eyed at the thought of a dog carrying such courage. But recognition, though delayed, eventually came. One autumn morning, Daniel received a letter. The Department of Defense had approved a special ceremony to honor Hunter's service. Though the Medal of Honor was traditionally reserved for human soldiers, Hunter would be awarded a Medal of Honor K9 distinction, a symbol that his bravery would not be forgotten. At the ceremony, held in Washington, D.C., veterans, soldiers, and families gathered. Hunter walked proudly by Daniel's side, a dignified presence despite the scars on his body. The medal, engraved with symbols of loyalty and sacrifice, was placed around his neck as the crowd rose in applause. Daniel's eyes misted as he whispered, "You earned this, buddy, more than anyone knows." Hunter's story could have ended there, but it didn't. His legacy lived on through every person who heard it, through every soldier whose life was saved because of his nose, through every child who learned what loyalty meant by meeting him. In a world filled with fleeting headlines, Hunter's tale became a quiet testament to courage that doesn't need to shout. A dog, born on a farm in Kentucky, had walked into history not by seeking glory, but by simply doing what he was born to do: protect those he loved. The applause from the Washington, D.C. ceremony echoed in Daniel's memory for weeks afterward. Hunter had stood tall that day, a polished medal glinting on his chest, as though he had known the weight of what it meant. The crowd's standing ovation had filled the room, but for Daniel, the moment was intimate, just him and Hunter, as if the world had briefly paused to honor the bond that had once been forged in the dust and fire of war. Yet, once they returned home, life resumed its quieter rhythm. The world moved on to other headlines, other ceremonies, other heroes. For Daniel and Hunter, the real story unfolded not on podiums or under bright lights, but in the spaces between, where healing and resilience take root.
Hunter adapted to civilian life with remarkable ease. In their North Carolina neighborhood, he became somewhat of a local legend. Children would wave when they saw him trotting beside Daniel on morning walks, his gait steady, though slowed by the lingering injury from Helmand Province. Neighbors who once greeted Daniel politely now stopped to ask about Hunter, eager to hear the story of the dog who had saved a soldier's life overseas.
Daniel would smile modestly, often deflecting the attention, but he understood the importance of telling the tale. It wasn't just about Hunter. It was about every canine who had served and would serve again. Through Hunter, people began to understand that the sacrifices of war were not only human. But the transition wasn't without its challenges. Daniel still carried the invisible weight of post-traumatic stress. Nights were the hardest. Dreams that dragged him back to the desert, sounds that jolted him awake, breaths that came too fast in the quiet dark. It was in those moments that Hunter's presence mattered most. The shepherd would place his head gently on Daniel's chest, anchoring him to the present. No words were needed. No therapy could replicate the simple, grounding reassurance of that weight, that warmth, that reminder that he wasn't alone. Daniel often said to friends, "Hunter saved me twice, once overseas and once at home." As the months passed, invitations began to pour in. Veterans organizations, schools, even small-town councils wanted Daniel and Hunter to speak. At first, Daniel was hesitant. He wasn't a natural public speaker. But each time he stepped onto a stage and told their story, he saw the faces of listeners light up with awe, empathy, and understanding. Hunter would sit beside him, calm and regal, sometimes eliciting gasps from children who couldn't believe a real Medal of Honor canine was in their midst. Teachers later told Daniel that students went home talking about loyalty and bravery in ways they hadn't before. Slowly, Daniel realized that sharing Hunter's story wasn't a burden, it was a duty. One of the most profound moments came at a high school assembly in rural Virginia. Daniel had just finished recounting the Helmand mission, his voice cracking as he described Hunter shielding him from the blast. The auditorium was silent, every eye locked on the stage. Then, from the back row, a student stood and raised his hand.
"My brother didn't come home from Afghanistan," he said softly. "But knowing there was a dog like Hunter out there, saving lives, makes me feel like maybe someone else's brother got to come home because of him." The words hit Daniel like a wave. He looked down at Hunter, who wagged his tail slightly as if acknowledging the boy, and realized the depth of their story's impact. Hunter wasn't just a hero to him. He was becoming a symbol of hope for others. Over time, Daniel began working with nonprofits that focused on canine veterans. He advocated for better retirement programs, ensuring that military dogs would be allowed to retire with dignity and not be left behind. Hunter often accompanied him to Capitol Hill, walking through marble corridors with the same confidence he once carried in Afghan villages. Staffers would stop mid-stride, captivated by his presence. Lawmakers leaned in closer during meetings, softened by the sight of a dog whose loyalty transcended politics. Daniel would tell them, "Hunter may not speak, but he represents countless silent heroes who can't tell their own stories." Hunter aged gracefully, though time eventually revealed its hand. His once bounding strides shortened, his muzzle frosted with white, his naps stretched longer. Yet his spirit never dimmed. Even in retirement, he carried himself with the dignity of a soldier. On Veterans Day parades, he would march proudly beside Daniel, chest out, medal shining. Crowds would cheer, and children would run forward to wave small flags in his direction. Some would shout, "Thank you, Hunter!" And though he couldn't reply in words, his calm eyes and gentle tail wags spoke volumes. The day finally came when Hunter's body, weary from years of service and sacrifice, began to falter. It was a crisp winter morning, the air filled with the scent of pine and the soft hush of snow. Daniel noticed Hunter struggling to rise from his bed.
He knelt beside him, stroking his fur, whispering, "It's okay, buddy. You've done enough." In those final hours, surrounded by family and with Daniel's hand resting gently on his chest, Hunter drifted peacefully across the threshold of life. There were tears, deep and unrelenting, but also a profound sense of gratitude. Hunter had given more than anyone could ask, and he had left behind a legacy that would never fade. The funeral was small, held in the backyard Daniel had once struggled to reclaim from his memories. Friends, neighbors, and fellow veterans gathered. A folded flag was placed beside Hunter's casket, and Daniel spoke through trembling words. He wasn't just my dog. He was my brother, my partner, my protector. He saved lives overseas, but he saved mine every day since. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the snow, a bugler played taps. Hunter was laid to rest beneath an oak tree, his medal displayed proudly nearby. It was a farewell befitting a warrior. In the months that followed, Hunter's story continued to ripple outward. Documentaries featured his bravery. Schools trod his legacy during Veterans Week, and statues were commissioned in his honor. Daniel dedicated himself to preserving Hunter's memory, creating a foundation to support retired canines. Each initiative carried Hunter's name, ensuring that future generations would know not only the story of one Medal of Honor canine, but the broader truth of loyalty, service, and sacrifice embodied by all military dogs. Years later, Daniel would often return to the oak tree in his backyard. He would sit quietly, sometimes with a cup of coffee, sometimes with nothing but silence, and reflect on the journey they had shared. Hunter's grave was marked with a simple stone, engraved with the words, "Hunter, faithful beyond measure." Daniel knew that words could never fully capture
what Hunter had meant to him, but they were enough to remind anyone who passed by that true heroism often comes with 4 paws and a wagging tail. Hunter's legacy became more than a story of war. It was a reminder of what it means to be loyal, to protect without hesitation, to love without condition. For those who met him, even briefly, the impact was unforgettable. For those who only heard his story, the lesson was clear. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it lies quietly at your feet, ready to stand between you and danger without a second thought. And so, as the years rolled on, Hunter's name joined the quiet chorus of unsung heroes whose sacrifices shaped the safety and freedom of countless lives. His story, though once known by only a few, became a beacon for many. Children grew up telling their friends about the Medal of Honor canine. Veterans found comfort knowing his courage had saved others. Families looked at their own pets with newfound appreciation, seeing in them the same loyalty that had carried Hunter through battlefields and backyards alike. Today, when people speak of Hunter, they don't just remember a German Shepherd from Kentucky. They remember the embodiment of valor, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his dog. They remember the day a 4-legged warrior shielded his partner from a blast. They remember the standing ovation in Washington, the parades, the classrooms, the backyard funeral beneath the oak. They remember because Hunter's story is not just about one dog. It is about the timeless truth that love and loyalty can be the most powerful forms of courage. And if you've listened this far, if Hunter's story has touched your heart the way it has touched so many others, then carry it forward. Share it with someone who needs to hear about loyalty, bravery, and sacrifice. Because stories like Hunter's deserve to live on, not just in history books, but in the hearts of every person who understands that heroes come in many forms. So as we close this documentary, let's honor not only Hunter, but every canine who has walked into danger so that others might live. Their paw prints may fade from the earth, but their courage leaves a mark that no passage of time can erase. Thank you for watching this story of the Medal of Honor canine whose story few know about. If it inspired you, if it reminded you of the power of loyalty and love, then please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. By doing so, you help us bring more stories of courage and devotion to the world, stories that remind us all of what it truly means to be a hero.